Hey everybody, I'm here with Dr. Leland Stillman. He is a medical doctor that we've just kind of connected here locally in Richmond, Virginia. I won't do your bio justice, so I'll let you share with everybody kind of your background and kind of what you're doing in the world right now.
So thanks for having me. I'm a medical doctor. I trained at the University of Virginia for medical school, and then I went to Maine Medical Center in Portland, Maine, and completed a residency in internal medicine. And after residency, I traveled around the country as a physician working in different hospitals and always knew I'd wanted to do integrative alternative medicine, but wasn't sure exactly what that ought to look like. And recently began working at Andrews Wellness Consulting in Colonial Heights, and we're opening another branch in Williamsburg. And I work really with people from, well, really all over the state. And actually, there's such an interest in what we do that I have a lot of patients from out of town. And so, what I focus on with patients is diet, lifestyle, changing really their environment in order to help them get better.
Yeah, I love that. So talk to us a little bit about sort of what your story is a little bit on a high level. I know you can't go into all the details on our short conversation today. I want to be respectful of your time and everybody else's, but just sort of an overview of what your background was and what sort of led you to this and why you believe it's so important for people to, look at their health through the lens that you can help them see it through.
So I became interested in medicine and really becoming a physician when I was very young. Uh, my sister, myself, my mother, we had different medical issues that didn't really improve with conventional medicine. And as I went through my conventional medical training, and I really chose to go to medical school and get a conventional education because it was the most solid foundation for whatever I was going to build on that. I didn't know if I was going to go on and do acupuncture, if I was going to go on and focus on herbs. I mean, there's so many different modalities out there, but I knew I wanted a very solid, very grounded, very scientific education. And, I went through my training and I watched and I followed the guidelines and, learned all of the algorithms and this, that, and the other thing, but I just didn't see my patients getting better. And the unfortunate reality is that with the way that the system is set up, you know, the whole premise behind drugs and surgery is really that you've got to rearrange or break physiology in order to get the patient better. But what patients, realize is that a lot of the time their drugs will get rid of a symptom or lower their blood pressure, help them feel better, but over time they lose their effectiveness. And countless patients come to me and they say, I was on this drug or that drug, whether it's, Zoloft or Prozac or Ativan or whatever. And they say, and it worked for years, but then it stopped working.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I looked at how I was practicing medicine, the more I learned, the more I wanted to look for the causes of disease in the environment. And, the vast majority of problems, 99.9% of them, they are not genetic. They are often, sort of in the seed in someone's genes, like they're predisposed to it. But how they live really determines how that disease manifests, how severe it is, when it manifests. And that also dictates really when you or how you treat them and what kind of progress you can make with diet and lifestyle and all that sort of stuff. And as I got more and more into these sorts of changes, I was impressed by what kind of dramatic effects I could have on people's lives. I mean, people with chronic headaches disappearing, people with chronic fatigue suddenly being able to get out of bed and go back to work. And the sheer variety of factors in the environment really is incredible. And one of the things that I've found is that very few people really take a truly comprehensive approach to the environment, which is really my fascination. And there's no modality of medicine, alternative or conventional, that I don't have a connection to and some knowledge of and ability to integrate it into a patient's treatment protocol. And so that's really what I do. I want to be the person who's helping them understand what problem do they need an acupuncturist for, what do they need a chiropractor for, what do we treat with herbs, what do we treat with supplements, when do they need something that's an infusion rather than a pill. How can we use everything from light to sound to the electromagnetic force of the earth to heal them and help them get the results that they want. And now for me, my practice is really transforming from focusing on symptoms and trying to get people relief from whatever's crippling them to really, how do we not only do that, but how do we help them to achieve their greatest possible performance and well-being so that they're their best self every day, all day, achieving everything they want to achieve.
Yeah, I love that. I can't tell you how happy it's making me right now. And I think I said to you this to you when we talked before, to hear a medical doctor like saying these words. It's like, ah. So I worked in a kind of a little bit of a different environment. It was a medical practice turned functional, and it was more of a membership type practice, membership model where they bring everyone in, everyone gets the same kind of foundation labs, some stuff around lifestyle, some things around fitness and exercise, and it's a little more of a cookie cutter approach. Tell us a little bit about how you operate. Like, so somebody comes to you and says, I think I need what you do. I think I have some underlying things that just need to get kind of uncovered and resolved, but I don't think I need sort of that, major deep dive that this other practice is doing. Give us a little idea how you work with clients when they come to you.
I always start with the most fundamental things first. One of my, I don't know if I should call it a pet peeve, but one of the patterns that I see that bothers me is that a lot of people will go out and they'll spend hundreds of dollars on supplements, thousands of dollars on this, that, the other thing. They'll buy gadgets and gizmos, and they'll see every practitioner in town. And then you talk to them and you realize they're missing some huge basic thing. And so I start from just, okay, what does this person's day look like? What are they doing? And there's no aspect of their environment that I'm not thinking about as a cause of their symptoms. And I pay particular attention to when their health changes and what change occurred in their life associated with that. Was it a major shift in their relationship? Was it a major shift in their work environment? They go from working outside all the time to working inside all the time. Did they start to wear glasses? Did they change their diet somehow? Did they change their latitude? Did they move from Florida to Maine and all of a sudden they're depressed? Well, maybe that's their light environment. And what's funny is it's hard for me to talk about because as I'm talking to people about what's changed in their life, there's like many, many different variables going through my head as to what question I ask next. But that's basically how I approach it. And then it's taking them from where they are to where they need to be one step at a time. I can talk for easily 30 minutes, an hour longer with a patient, give them a whole page of things to do. And I find that generally I try not to overwhelm people, but I really can give them as much as they can handle between one visit and the next for fixing all the basic stuff. And then we evaluate and we quantify their physiology. What's their magnesium level? What are their electrolytes doing? What are their vitamin levels? Vitamin A, vitamin D. Where do we need to go with those? What do we need to change about their diet? What are they eating that's working for them? What's not working for them? When are their meal times? What should those meal times be? All these different factors. And that's where I start. And then when you have the clinical picture with some clarity and you've also done some minor changes and seen how much progress they've made, then you start to work towards, well, what's next? And there's not really a cookie cutter, approach with me, because if somebody, for example, tells me that they are on Bluetooth all the time in their car, and then they're next to a Wi-Fi router at night. Their Wi-Fi router is right next to their bed, and their phone is on constantly right by their bed, and they have the Apple AirPods or whatever they're called. Then I'm going to tell them, well, listen, maybe a big part of your problem is the amount of microwave and radio wave radiation that you're exposed to. And I'm not here to tell you what to do, but you need to cut back on that and see what difference it makes in your symptoms. Because it's really highly variable and it's often more of a toll over time. And that's just one example. I could go through that for light, for sound, for what somebody's eating, for supplements, herbs, nutrients, all that stuff.
Right.
which means that for me, I work with people over a long period of time, often spending, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours on a single visit, really trying to figure out what's going on and then give them all the pieces of the puzzle for them to take home, fix, and then come back to see me the next, a couple weeks later or a month.
Great. Yeah. So do you find that, do you find that you get a lot of pushback from people around making lifestyle changes? I mean, do you still have people going, okay, but I need the pill first? Um, I mean, I guess there's always going to be that part of our human makeup and how we're programmed to some degree, but,
Right.
um, do you have to convince people, or by the time they get to you, they know how you operate and kind of where you're coming from and they're ready for that? Like what's been your experience?
Most people, who are willing to step outside of the conventional medical model are interested in doing whatever it takes to get better. Now, whether or not they're willing to go the full mile or not is a totally different story. But, I explain to every patient that really this is not so much about, my job is not to give them as many heartbeats and moments on this earth as possible. It's to make the ones they have as meaningful as possible. Obviously, that's linked to longevity. But, the fascinating thing about people is that we're willing to sacrifice our well-being for a certain amount of fame, fortune, and fulfillment that go along with that. So if you think about it, the most highly paid, compensated people in our society take the biggest risks and have the greatest occupational hazards.
Yeah.
And, firemen, policemen, fighter pilots, even, politicians, they have remarkable risk, right? The chances of the garbage man getting assassinated are not the same as, the chances of a politician getting assassinated. Just like the chances of a fighter pilot being killed in action are completely different from a commercial airline pilot. If you have two people sitting at a bar and then you introduce them to a commercial airline pilot and a fighter pilot, they're going to be more impressed with the fighter pilot. So it's interesting. I have so many people who come to me and they say, I absolutely cannot quit my high-powered, high-stress, very challenging job. I need you to get me back to where I was so that I can do it not only as well as I was doing it, but even better. And that's my job. And the beauty of what I do, though, is that, a lot of people are focused on just diet and there's people who focus on more on light or on herbs or on ozone. I mean, people can find these incredibly small niches in terms of what problems they treat and then how they treat them. But because I like to think I have all these different tools in my toolbox, I don't run out of options. In fact, more often than not, people are leaving my office and I'm thinking, should I be giving them more tools than we've talked about today? Or are they not ready for those tools?
Right.
And, that's a case by case basis, but if somebody were to tell me, hey, I can't stop or I can't get rid of my exposure to this, that, or the other thing, it's like, okay, well then we're just going to work on other pieces of the puzzle and we'll see what progress we can make. And at a certain point, you may have to make some hard decisions about what to do, where to live, and so on and so forth. And that depends a lot on the patient. If they come to you and they have a lot of serious medical issues that are at a point where they're either going to get better or those medical issues are going to take their life, then you have to make hard choices about what you're willing to give up and what risks you're willing to take. But that's life.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I guess because I'm not licensed as a, functional health coach, I have to tell people, I want to educate you. I want to empower you and help you to understand like what's going on in your body versus like, obviously I'm not prescribing anything, but being a partner, so I think it's incredible that, you're going down this path and you're partnering with people in a different way. And I love the idea that you are, kind of looking at all modalities, acupuncture, whatever it might be, other things for people to kind of explore and consider for healing. Talk a little bit about your perspective on coronavirus. Like, I don't want to open any can of worms. Sure. In any way, because I know we can go down a lot of rabbit holes with that, but just at a high level, like, what are your thoughts around like what is happening and what's it going to look like going forward? Like, I know we had a really nice conversation a couple weeks ago about it, and I really appreciated your point of view. So just share a little bit about your thoughts there, if you would.
The conversation that I hope people will begin to have in their private lives, in public, is not really the conversation that we're having. And really, there are two pieces to this. The first piece is, and I'm not going to get into the conspiracy theories behind this, but simply, why in 2020 are governments all over the world still investigating and working on bio warfare and bioterrorism research? It's a simple fact that governments are doing this, and whether or not this virus came out of a government lab, which I don't want to get into, we should really ask ourselves, why are we not having a conversation about stopping governments from doing this, demilitarizing ourselves in this way? We have children going hungry, we have people unemployed, and yet we're spending money trying to figure out how to weaponize nature. This is a big mistake. And the fact that people are not talking about this in, the mainstream media and the news and so on and so forth is unfortunate. And it's something that people can take tangible steps to change. Just post that on your social media. Why aren't we talking about demilitarizing nature, which is really what we ought to do? And the second thing is simply this: the virulence of a pandemic depends in large part upon the health of the populace. Some pandemics are very deadly to the young and healthy, like the 1918 Spanish flu. Some of them, or the vast majority of them, tend to strike those who are older and more vulnerable in their health. The reality from the numbers from coronavirus is that we know that this virus is affecting most significantly those who have the worst underlying health. Nursing home residents, people with chronic diseases, whether that's obesity or diabetes or high blood pressure or they smoke. And so what we really need to ask ourselves is, why do our societies have these rampant epidemics of disease? Why are a third of Americans pre-diabetic? Why are another third full-on diabetic? Why are a third overweight? Why are a third obese? And the third that's not in any of those categories actually has all these other health problems. And I can't tell you how many people come in who look like the picture of health. They're depressed, they're anxious. I mean, I feel like most people I meet can tell me a story about someone in their life who's beautiful and has it all, but is horribly depressed or terribly anxious or crippled by their mental health issues. And so everyone's got these medical issues, and these problems are becoming worse, not better. Prescription drug rates are going up, not down. And we need to ask ourselves, why are these diseases increasing in prevalence and severity? And the answer is frankly very simple. We have changed so many things in our environment that our bodies rely on to be healthy. And Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, he said many things that stick with me. One of them is, and the number one thing that I tell people is, the greatest medicine of all is teaching people how not to need it. In other words, teaching them how to live in a way that they don't get sick, which is not a great business model, which is why healthcare in this country is like 25% of the GDP. And the other thing that he said is that illnesses don't come on us out of the blue. They, he said sin, and it's in Greek, so it doesn't quite translate perfectly, but he says we sin daily, and as these small sins accumulate, gradually illnesses appear. And so when I go back and look at the environment, all the changes that we've made, what have we done? We've moved indoors, out of the sunlight. We've created artificial light. We have artificial packaged processed food. We have radically changed what we eat. Now you can eat like you live on the equator, but you can be in Manitoba, Canada, or you can be in Barrow, Alaska. This doesn't make any sense. And, the list goes on and on and on. And so people need to stop making it complicated and make it simple. We're the only animal on planet Earth that lives indoors and eats a non-local, non-seasonal diet. And that's really a very simple way of looking at it, but darn if it doesn't work, right? I mean, it almost astonishes me that I have so much job security, because I literally sometimes just tell people, spend more time outside, wiggle your toes in the grass, and eat natural, healthy food that's local and fresh. And they do it and they feel better, So, I mean, obviously it's a little bit more complicated than that. They need guidance with labs, and when do they see the acupuncturist? When do they see the chiropractor? Do they really need to spend $4,000 on this wellness retreat in Sedona, or should they spend that money on something else? Totally different questions. But, these are the conversations we need to have. Why is society so sick, and what should we do to get it better? And why are governments spending money researching bioterrorism agents when they could be doing things like figuring out how to keep pandemics from putting everybody out of work?
Yeah. Okay, so if I come to you next week and I say, other than maybe a couple extra pounds, maybe 10 pounds of weight, and maybe my sleep, it comes and goes. I don't really have a lot of significant health issues, but I don't want to be terrified when the next pandemic comes. And I don't want the cancer that my mom has or the heart disease that my dad has. What do you do with me? What does that look like? A patient like that comes to you and just says, this is what I say a lot, that I try to do, is support people to age healthy. Like, I want you to be able to run with your grandchildren and play with them and walk your, kids down the aisle or whatever it might be, just enjoy your life after retirement, and age healthy. So, I mean, I know for me, that's a priority. And I know for a lot of people that I work with, that tends to be a priority. What does that look like in your practice?
So number one, take an inventory. What is going on? What is going wrong? What has gone wrong? And what do you really want to avoid? Then lab testing, imaging when appropriate. What do we need to look at? There are so many different markers of health, from levels of nutrients in the blood to functional assays of nutrients in red blood cells to levels of urinary metabolites. And then, you don't need to do lab testing. Do you need some kind of device that monitors your sleep, a heart rate variability device? Do you want a ring? Do you want a bracelet? Do you want to wear an actual heart rate variability monitor across your heart? All of these things are ways that I gather information in order to guide people towards their ultimate goal. And it's all about, my mentor, Dr. Anthony Beck, he says, quantify, qualify, measure, monitor. That's exactly what we do. It's regular lab draws until we get every number exactly where we want it. It's focusing on measuring performance, measuring quality of life, finding ways to quantify that in addition to qualifying it, and then tracking it. And this is how I've found that there's only really two ways to really make a mistake with your health. There's two things that are really threatening to your health. I call them small sins, and I call them what's in your blind spot. It's actually remarkably like driving a car. So the vast majority of car accidents are caused by people doing little things they don't think matter, like checking their phone or, I don't know, like doing their makeup in the rearview mirror, things they know they shouldn't do, but they sort of say, it's okay, I'm just going to do it today, right? And that in life is like, I know I shouldn't have the chocolate cake, but I'm just going to do it today. And today turns into tomorrow, turns into 3 times a week, turns into 4 days a week, turns into like a 6-pack instead of a beer at night. And people they just go down that road. Unless they're constantly raising their standard, unless they're constantly measuring and monitoring. Because if you start to do that and you're measuring and you're monitoring what your health metrics are, then you say, my deadlift has slacked off. Oh, my mile time is longer. Oh, my breath hold times are longer. And then you say, wow, that extra beer matters. That extra piece of cake, I can't have it, Yeah. The more you give people to measure, the more motivated they are and the more they see how what they do affects their health. The other thing is what's in your blind spot. And this is what I find remarkable about so much medicine. People can do very complicated, very sophisticated, very expensive medicine. And they never ask the patient about all those other factors. What's their light environment? What's their sound environment like? Do they happen to live near like a train trestle and it goes by all the time? Or are they in an office where there's some kind of high-pitched noise that they're barely aware of? These things have profound effects on people's physiology and biology, and they're very unappreciated or underappreciated corners of the literature. And it takes a lot to find somebody, and a lot of this, my mentor, Dr. Beck, has gotten me into, but most of it I was aware of before I met him. when you don't focus on the entire environment, you miss things and people get sick because of what's in their blind spot. And if you're not having them measure and monitor, they begin to think their small sins don't matter. And that's how they ultimately crash.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Well, I feel like we could sit here and talk all day, and maybe we'll come back and, address some other things, some questions maybe that you get a lot or I get a lot, and kind of just continue the conversation, because I know, at least in my world, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to, want to get in contact with you and understand more about what you do. So right now, we're just you're taking inquiries through your website. Is that right?
Mhm.
Tell us how we can get in touch with you. And
So the best way for people to get in touch with me is to fill out a brief survey on my website. That's stillmanmd.com. People who also just want to book an appointment can call our office. It's 804-733-3333. I see patients physically at Anders Wellness Consulting. A lot of my time is spent in telemedicine with patients all over the country and even all over the world.
yeah, great. I'll share some links below. So thank you for your time. Thank you for what you're doing in this world. And, let's just keep having the conversations in hopes that more of what you're doing is popping up around us, and that people understand, really truly understand their health can really be in their own hands, and that they can be the driver of that. So thank you for all you
Absolutely.
thank
Thank
you.
you for having me. I look forward to chatting again soon.